We can start.
I'd like to stand here for.
Okay. All right. Good morning. This quarter, we are doing the Testimony of Faithful Witnesses, which you could call it a Bible character study. During the month of June, which was the first month of the quarter, we were in the Old Testament. We started with Deborah and Barak in the book of Judges. And then last week was 1 Samuel. We talked about Hannah and her husband Elkanah, who were the parents of Israel's last judge, Samuel. And we'll have Samuel a little bit in today's lesson, which is Jonathan and David. We'll take David through about 15 years of his life. It's believed around the age of 15 when he became a lyre player for Saul to calm his spirit. And then we'll take him up till about the age of 30 or something, till the time of the death of Saul and Jonathan. So, happy Father's Day. June 21. So happy Father's Day to everyone who are fathers. And then this is also another important day. First day of summer. Enjoy 14 hours and 54 minutes of daylight. And if you were in Alaska, you'd have 24 hours of daylight all the time. So 14 hours, 54 minutes, the sun will be at its highest point in the sky. Okay, a lesson context for this lesson today. We'll look at the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel, mostly 1st Samuel. Same book we looked at last week when we were studying Hannah. We're going to introduce three characters in the books of 1st Samuel, which was Samuel, who was the son of Hannah and Elkanah, and then Saul, the first king of Israel, and then David, who would be the second king of Israel. Interesting, neither one were asked if they wanted the job, sort of drafted. The boy Samuel grew up to be an important figure. He would be, as I said, he would be the last of the judges. There were like 13 judges which followed after the death of Joshua, when the Israelites sort of got out of line. They did the evil thing. They forgot the Lord and they worshiped other gods. So Samuel takes Israel from the period of the judges. He'd be the last of the judges following the death of Eli until the time of Israel's first king, which was Saul. He was the one chosen by God to anoint Saul as king when Israel came to him and said, you're getting old, your sons don't follow in your ways, now give us a king. And it's also sort of hinted in the book of Judges that everyone was doing what they felt, what they thought. There was no upper authority over them, and it sort of hints if only they had a king, this wouldn't have happened. So kings at this time were seen as military protectors, able to lead their subjects in battle. So why do we have two books? We have two books, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians in the New Testament, but that's because they were written at different times. This 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles were originally one book. They were broken in two when the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, were translated into Greek. Greek became the predominant language about the 4th, 3rd century BC, so they decided, let's get together. They got together 70 scholars in Alexandria, Egypt, and said, we need to make a Greek copy of the Scriptures so more people will be able to read it. The original books wouldn't fit on a single parchment. They used parchment over papyrus. Parchment was more durable than the papyrus. Plus, you can also get it wet and it'd still be okay. But due to the size, weight, and language, they divided into two because, as you know, Hebrew didn't have any vowels. So when you translate from Hebrew into Greek, you got to add vowels, and that made almost double the size of it. It would be too heavy, too bulky to have it on one scroll. So before Saul's rule ended, I don't know how far, maybe even got halfway into it, God was displeased with Saul for not obeying his word explicitly. And so he was told by Saul, that his kingdom would not endure. So he was told to go to the house of Jesse and to anoint one of his sons as the new king. Well, this scared Samuel. He says, if Saul finds out about this, he's going to kill me. So God gives Samuel an excuse. He said, just tell him you're going there to offer sacrifice if anyone asks. So obviously Saul was not invited to the anointing. Jonathan then is first mentioned in 1 Samuel 13 and 14, where he's depicted as a warrior. He has him in his armor bearer, and he is a real good warrior, killing lots of the enemies who were the Philistines at this time. And you also see when studying Jonathan that really he is a man of God. He says, there is no restraint to the Lord to save by many or by few. So only if you only have a few, if you have the Lord on your side, you'll win. God's choice, however, was not Saul. He wanted David. And when Samuel told Saul that his kingdom would not endure, he said, God has chosen a man after his own heart to take over the kingdom. So a little bit on David. He was of the tribe of Judah, a descendant of Boaz and Ruth. It's interesting, if you read the book of Ruth, the last word in the book of Ruth is David. It has a genealogy there. When God chose a king, it was interesting that he did not choose someone from the tribe of Judah, but from the tribe of Benjamin, the smallest tribe, because Jacob in his prophecy at the end of Genesis said, the scepter would never depart from Judah. So why did God pick someone from Benjamin? Well, he knew that eventually Judah would be the line, and that would remain through Christ. He was a shepherd. He tended his father's flocks near Bethlehem. And he was, you could call him the good shepherd. If a lion or a bear tried to take one of the sheep, he would go after it. He would risk his own life to protect one of his father's sheep. Anointed by Samuel as Saul's eventual replacement. At a very young age, apparently, when Samuel came to Jesse, he said, get your sons together. I'm going to anoint one as king. And they brought them all up. He sees Eliab, the oldest one. He says, this is the son. He's tall, he's strong. He goes through all the sons. And says, not this one. Do you have any other one? Well, we got David out watching the sheep. Surely you don't want him. And then Samuel says, well, we're not going to do anything. Go get him. And then he anoints him. And this was done in front of his entire family, all the sons. So they were able to keep a secret. Saul never found out that this had happened. We're first introduced to David when the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and the Lord sent an evil spirit of the Lord came upon him and was tormenting him. And Saul's advisors suggested, well, you need to find someone who's good at playing the liar. And then once he plays, this spirit will depart. So they went around and said, well, the son of Jesse is good at playing the lyre. So then Saul got David to play the lyre for him. And once that happened, the evil spirit left him. Next, we see him, 1 Samuel 17. David has already been anointed the next king. So David comes up, and David may be thinking, well, if God wants me to be the next king, that's not going to happen if Goliath kills me. So he pretty much thinks that, well, God's going to protect me because I'm the next king. And this was obviously at a very young age, because when he does this, Saul doesn't say, well, who is that young man? He says, who is that young man's father? So he must have been very young. Children, young men, young girls were treated no better than a slave. So he wasn't even old enough where Saul wanted to know what's his name, what's his father's name. He wins respect from Jonathan and all the nation after killing Goliath, something that Saul wasn't willing to do, something Jonathan wasn't willing to do. But eventually, David's fame becomes so large that Saul sees him as a threat to himself and to the kingdom. Saul has two children that love David. Jonathan loved David, and his Saul's daughter, Michal, loved David and eventually would become his wife for a short period of time. Eventually, David realized, I got to get out of here. Saul is trying to kill me. So he leaves, he gathers his own private army, and had a couple of opportunities to kill Saul. And his followers went, well, why don't you kill him? And he said, I will not kill the Lord's anointed. Saul was still the Lord's anointed, and David did not want to harm him. He waited on the Lord. Be still and wait on the Lord. He waited on the Lord to handle Saul. And then he ruled Judah after the death of Saul for about 7 years in Hebron. And then later, after 7 years, he would be the king of all Israel. And then he ruled in Jerusalem. So there's sort of the family tree of David. He had quite a few brothers. He would have 8 wives and 19 sons, not counting the son that died with Bathsheba. And then he also had 2 sisters. One of the sisters was the mother of Joab. Joab would be the commander of his army. So Joab was David's nephew. So a little bit on Jonathan. Not quite as extensive as David's family tree, but Saul was the son of Kish. There's his wife. He had 3 sons, Jonathan, these 3 sons, and then Michal was his daughter, who would be David's wife. So we almost don't have Jonathan. Jonathan could very well have been killed under Saul's order. If you remember Jephthah's vow, where he made this vow and he said, the first thing comes out of my house, I'll offer as a burnt offering, and that's his daughter. Saul does a similar oath, which almost gets Jonathan killed. Now the Israelites were in distress that day because Saul had bound the people under an oath, saying, cursed be anyone who eats food before evening comes, before I've avenged myself of my enemies. So none of the troops tasted food. Do you really want to have it so your soldiers are going in battle and they're hungry, their stomachs are growling? The entire army, we know from a different passage, the entire army, that's 600 men. Army wasn't that big for Saul at the beginning. So these 600 men entered the woods, and there was honey on the ground. When they went into the woods, they saw the honey oozing out, yet no one put his hand to his mouth because they feared the oath, that cursed be the person that eats anything. Jonathan hadn't heard about it. He wasn't there, so he reached out with the end of his staff, took his hand and dipped it into the honeycomb. He raised his hand to his mouth and his eyes brightened. Then one of the soldiers told him, "Your father has bound the army under strict oaths, saying, 'Cursed be anyone who eats any food today.' That is why the men are faint, and that's why none of the other men took some of the honey." So later on, when Saul is inquiring of the Lord, he said, "Shall I go down and pursue the Philistines? Will you give them into Israel's hand?" But God didn't answer them that day. So apparently God was answering him before. Saul therefore said he realizes there was sin in the camp. And then he makes this second oath, "As surely as the Lord who rescues Israel lives." So he's making an oath in the name of the Lord. So even if the guilty party is his own son Jonathan, he's going to die. But, you know, his men knew, some of his men knew that it was Jonathan. So Saul then said to the Israelites, "You stand over here, and Jonathan and I." So he divides it into two groups, 600 over here, and then Saul and Jonathan, 600 versus the two. Which one is it? Then Saul prayed to the Lord, the God of Israel, "Why have you not answered your servant today? If the fault is in me or my son Jonathan, respond with Urim. But if the men of Israel are at fault, respond with Thummim." So Urim and the Thummim were the two stones that were on the high priest's vestige, or could be used to determine the will of the Lord. So Jonathan and Saul were taken by lot, and the men were cleared. So the 600 army were cleared. "Cast the lot between me and Jonathan, my son." And Jonathan was taken. Now, if you're a careful reader of this passage, you will see a footnote. The footnote says what's grayed out there was not in the Hebrew. That was added in the Greek text. So that's in the Greek Septuagint. So if you're just reading in the Hebrew, you just go, Saul prayed, and then Jonathan and Saul were taken. Then Saul said to Jonathan, "Tell me what you've done." So Jonathan told him, "I tasted a little honey with the end of my staff, and now I must die?" You know, he's incredulous here. I must die? Well, I guess it's not a question here. "May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if you do not die, Jonathan," because he made this oath in God's name. But the man said to Saul, "Should Jonathan die, he who has brought about this great deliverance in Israel? Never, as surely as the Lord lives, not a hair of his head will fall to the ground, for he did this today with God's help." So the men rescued Jonathan, and he was not put to death. Poor Jephthah's daughter, she didn't have anyone to rescue her. Then Saul stopped pursuing the Philistines, and they withdrew to their own land. So unexpected friendship. This takes place after David has killed Goliath and cut off his head, and he took his sword. So the friendship is in Saul's household, and the friendship includes the heir to the throne, the crown prince of Israel. So chapter 18, after David had finished talking with Saul, this is after he slew Goliath, Jonathan became one in spirit with David. The literal Hebrew is here, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, so they became one. And he loved him as himself. What is the second great commandment? Love your neighbor as yourself. Now it's in red there. You'll see how many times it's repeated that Jonathan loved David as himself. So from that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return home to his family. Now, one of the things sort of perplexing here is in verse chapter 16, David was acquainted with Saul because he played the lyre for him. So David is playing the lyre for him, but in chapter 17, after he slays Goliath, Saul doesn't seem to know who he is. He said, whose son is that guy? When, oh yeah, he's the one that's playing the lyre for you. So he did not let him return home to his family. So poor Jesse's lost a shepherd here. But all Israel was warned by Samuel that you want a king, this is what's going to happen. So here, 1 Samuel 8, 10 and 11, Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking for a king. This is what's going to happen if you get a king. This is what the king who will reign over you will do as his rights. So this is the right of the king. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of his chariots. Following verses, it says he's also going to take your daughters, to serve in his palace. So Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off his robe he was wearing and gave it to David along with his tunic, even his sword, his bow, and his belts. So he's given him quite a bit of stuff. And those were very rare for Israel at this time because there was not a blacksmith to be found in the territory of Israel because the Philistines had taken them away. Otherwise, the Hebrews would make weapons and spears. So verse 13, verse 22, not a soldier with Saul or Jonathan had a sword or a spear. Only Saul and David and his son Jonathan had a sword. So he's given his sword to David. So maybe, this is 5 chapters later, maybe there are more in the land at this time. He gave him his robe. Significance. It symbolized the country here in 1 Samuel 15:27 when Samuel tells Saul his kingdom will not last and he leaves. Then Saul grabbed a hold of his robe and he tore it off and he said, the Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel away from you and has given it to one of your neighbors. Samuel doesn't even know who this neighbor is yet. We don't find out until the next chapter. When Samuel goes to Jesse, he doesn't know which one. So Samuel knows it's given to someone else, but he doesn't know who. So he anoints him there, chapter 16, verse 13. That's when he finds out it's David. Also with robes, the king's daughter wore ornate robes to distinguish they were the virgin daughters of the king. And then, of course, the parable of the prodigal son, when he comes back, the father says, bring the best robe and put it on him, put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. So robes indicate you're a part of the family or that you're important. David's successes and Saul's jealousy. So whatever mission Saul sent him on, David was so successful that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the troops and all of Saul's officers as well. So things are still good here between Saul and David. Saul sees he's successful. He sees that the Lord is with him, so he gives him these missions to do, and he's successful, and everyone is aware of this. So when the men were returning home after David had killed the Philistine, there in chapter 17, the women came out from all the towns of Israel to meet King Saul, singing and dancing with joyful songs and with timbrels and with lyres. There's the timbrel there on the left. Looks like a sort of like tambourine. And on the right there is the lyre. Amazon Prime apparently has a video series called The House of David. I haven't seen it, but this is a screenshot from that and shows what a lyre looks like. And the women, as they came out, they danced, they sang, Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. Can you imagine that coming back today? Yeah. Yeah, Bill just came back from the war in Afghanistan. And he killed 25 Taliban. Let's give a party for him. No, that doesn't happen today. Saul was very angry. This refrain displeased him greatly. They have credited David with tens of thousands, he thought, but me with only thousands. Both of them are exaggerations, of course. What more can he get but the kingdom? Well, he is going to get the kingdom because he doesn't know that Saul has been anointed as the next king. From that time on, Saul kept a close eye on David. Keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. Saul tries to kill David, 1 Samuel 19. Saul told his son Jonathan and all the attendants to kill David. Well, Jonathan loves David as his own soul. All Israel loved David, so how far is he going to get with that? But Jonathan had taken a great liking to David. We're told of that. He loved him as his own soul. And he warned David, my father Saul is looking for a chance, for an opportunity to kill you, to take your life. So be on your guard tomorrow morning. Go into hiding and stay there. Well, tomorrow morning they were going to have a festival, the New Moon Festival, which starts a new month. This was a festival that was in the Torah as a festival that you take to celebrate the beginning of a new moon. And then Jonathan says, I'll go out and stand with my father in the field where you are. I'll speak to him about you and will tell you what I find out about. So Jonathan is going to feel his father out. Has he sort of mellowed out? Does he still want to kill him? Or is he better now? Is he going to let him live? So Jonathan defends David, chapter 19, verses 4 through 6. Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father and said to him, let not the king do wrong to his servant David. For 2 reasons. Don't do wrong to him. He has not done anything to wrong you. You know, you think he's taken the kingdom? Well, he hasn't done anything that would indicate he's going to take the kingdom. And 2, what he has done has benefited you greatly. He has helped you defeat your enemy, the Philistines. He's been of great benefit to you. He took his life into his own hands when he killed the Philistine. Something you were unwilling to do, something I was unwilling to do, something all the men of your army were unwilling to do. You know, Goliath had our morale down in the basement, and then David comes out and kills their warrior, and then they all flee. All the Philistines flee. The Lord won a great victory for all Israel. The Lord won a great victory. Not David. The Lord was with David. Otherwise, David couldn't have killed him without the Lord. And you saw it, and you were glad. You spoke with David. You know, you promoted David when that happened. Why then would you do wrong to an innocent man like David by killing him for no reason? You have no motive to kill him. You know, you have a motive for promoting him, not to kill him. So Saul listened to Jonathan and took this oath, as surely as the Lord lives. Again, an oath in the name of the Lord. David will not be put to death. So we had the previous oath that the person who ate food would die. Saul wanted to keep that oath. But the oath to save a person from death, this oath doesn't last very long. And he takes it in the name of the Lord. Unwavering alliance, 1 Samuel chapter 20. verses 16, 17, 30, 34, and 42. David and Jonathan will expand his covenant with David. Honorable defense, 30 through 34. Permanent peace, verse 42. So Jonathan makes a covenant with the house of David. Seems odd. The house of David includes David. He doesn't have any children. He doesn't have a wife. So just the house of David. He will have a house. May the Lord call David's enemies to account. And Jonathan had David reaffirm his oath out of love for him, for he loved him as himself. So apparently David also had an oath concerning how he would treat Jonathan. So Saul's anger flared, now we'll go to verse 30. Saul's anger flared up at Jonathan, and he said to him, "You son of a perverse and rebellious woman." That was a curse at that time, wasn't it? You son of a perverse and rebellious woman. Well, he's also Saul's son. Don't I know that you have sided with the son of Jesse? He doesn't even call him David, son of Jesse, to your own shame, and to the shame of the mother who bore you. Because the mother who bore you, Jonathan, is expecting you to be the next king, not David. As long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. So apparently, Saul knows that as long as David lives, that his son Jonathan's chances of being the next king are greatly reduced. Now, send someone to bring him to me, for he must die. Well, that's not going to happen, we know. So Jonathan continues to defend his friend David. What has he done? He's asking that same question, he's innocent. What has he done that deserves death? He hasn't tried to take over the kingdom. He hasn't tried to kill you. He hasn't tried to kill me or anything. Jonathan asked of his father, but Saul hurled his spear at him to kill him. Then Jonathan knew that his father intended to kill David. So Saul goes as far as trying to kill his own son when his own son will not kill David. Perhaps he thinks, well, my second oldest son will at least have it if Jonathan can't have it. But he goes as far as the attempted murder of his own son. Jonathan got up from the table in fierce anger. So apparently this was while they were sitting down to eat or something that this happened. On the second day of the feast, this is the new moon feast, which marks the beginning of a new month. And that's found in 1 Samuel 20:24. So on the second day of this feast, he did not eat because he was grieved at his father's shameful treatment of David. So last week we had Hannah who didn't want to eat. Today we've got Jonathan didn't want to eat because he was so ashamed of his father. So Jonathan affirms David will be king. So finally, Jonathan comes out and says he realizes that not he, Jonathan, but David will be the next king. But he also mentions a position for himself in that kingdom. While David was at Horesh in the desert of Ziph, he learned that Saul had come out to take his life. So this is after David has fled and he has a band of men and they're going about the countryside. And Saul's son Jonathan went to David. So apparently David and Jonathan are keeping in touch because Saul doesn't know where he is, but Jonathan knows how to get a hold of David. So Jonathan goes to David at Horesh and helped him find strength in God. And isn't that interesting? Jonathan helps him find strength in God. We know from Jesus after the 40 days in the wilderness, he was hungry. And said after those 40 days, an angel came to minister him to Jesus after those 40 days in the wilderness. So here is Horesh down. So we're down here. So there's Jerusalem up there, which would be the capital. Gibeah is Saul's hometown, and that's where he was living. So that was the capital of Israel at the time of Saul. So we're down here right now at Horesh, and here's that wilderness of Zin right there. So Jonathan is encouraging David. He says, don't be afraid. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. So how does he know that? Faith, right? You will be king over Israel, and I will be second to you. And I think if Jonathan hadn't died, that probably would have happened. Jonathan would not have done anything, or David would not have done anything to hurt Jonathan. Even my father Saul knows this, so that's why he's trying to kill you, because he knows you'll be king, and his line will end with him. So the two of them made a covenant before the Lord. Then Jonathan went home, that's up in Gibeah, but David remained at Horesh. Death of Saul and Jonathan. So now the Philistines fought, so final great battle with the Philistines. The Philistines will be an enemy throughout the reign of David, even into the early part of the reign of David. Now the Philistines fought against Israel. So quite a long time, the Philistines were enemies in the book of Judges. And throughout the reign of the judges, throughout the reign of Saul, and throughout the early reign of David. So the Israelites fled before them, and many fell dead on Mount Gilboa, which is near Mount Tabor. The Philistines were in hot pursuit of Saul and his sons, and they killed his sons, Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. So God sees to it that pretty much the house of Saul is wiped out. He and his 3 sons are killed on the same day. The fighting grew fierce around Saul. When the archers overtook him, they wounded him critically. He's about to die. Saul says to his armor bearer, draw your sword and run me through, or these uncircumcised fellows will come and run me through and abuse me. So he doesn't want to be, he wants a quick death. He does not want to be tortured by these uncircumcised Philistines that are after him. But his armor bearer was terrified and wouldn't do it, so Saul took his own sword and fell on it. So Saul is dead, his 3 sons are dead. When the armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he too fell on his sword and died with him. So Saul and his 3 sons and his armor bearer and all his men died together that same day. So their bodies were out there, rotting. They pretty much had beheaded Saul. When the people of Jabesh Gilead heard that the Philistines had done what the Philistines had done to Saul, all their valiant men marched through the night to Bethshan. They took down the bodies of Saul and his sons from the wall of Bethshan and went to Jabesh, where they burned them. Then they took their bones and buried them under a tamarisk tree at Jabesh, and they fasted 7 days. So here's the men down here in Jabesh Gilead, and then they marched all the way up here at night to get the bodies. Lament for the dead. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women. So even after the death of Jonathan, when David kingdom is established, he has compassion. He remembers Jonathan and the love that they had for each other, and he shows compassion for him. This is in 2 Samuel chapter 9. I'm just going to read this. David asked, "Is there anyone still left in the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They summoned him to appear before David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" "At your service," he said. The king said, "Is there no one left alive from the house of Saul to whom I can still show kindness?" Ziba answers the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He's lame in both of his feet. Where is he?" "He's at the house of Machir, son of Amiel in Lo-debar." So King David had him brought down from Lo-debar, from the house of Machir, son of Amiel. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, in other words, Saul's grandson, he bowed down to pay honor. David said, "Are you Mephibosheth?" "At your service," he says. "Don't be afraid, for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather, and you will always eat at my table." Mephibosheth bowed down. "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said, "I have given you, your master's grandson, everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops, so that your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table." So he provided this in honor of Jonathan. So here's David's line here. Quite extensive, isn't it? All those wives, all those children. But 2 Samuel chapter 11, things will turn around for David. His encounter with Uriah and his wife. Nathan comes afterwards and tells him this parable about a rich man who had lots of cattle and everything, and a poor man only has a lamb. And when the rich man gets a visitor, he takes the poor man's lamb and kills it. David pronounced a sentence on the rich man. David, burned with anger against that man, said to Nathan, "Surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over because he did such a thing." David says, "He must die." "Nathan, you are the man. Because you did this, you have shown," this is the Lord, "but because you did this, you have shown utter contempt for the Lord. The son born to you will die. What is this? By doing this, you struck down Uriah the Hittite with a sword, and you took his wife to be your own. You killed him with the sword of the Ammonites." You know, we talk about David and Bathsheba committing adultery. There's absolutely no mention of adultery. What God was upset about is, you killed him so you could have his wife. And in the genealogy in Matthew, Bathsheba is called the wife of Uriah the Hittite. So you will repay 4 times. 4 sons die. God takes the son born to David and Bathsheba. And Nathan also says, the sword will never depart from your house. So he loses one son, God takes him. He loses another son, he's killed by his half-brother. Amnon rapes his half-sister. David doesn't do anything about it, so Absalom has him killed. Then Absalom goes into hiding. He comes back. He does a rebellion against David. David took Uriah's wife. Absalom takes David's concubines. So Absalom goes into hiding. Absalom's nephew, Joab, kills him. Then Solomon kills Adonijah. So 4 sons killed, 1 by the Lord, and the other 3 within David's household killed them. So thought to remember, honor God in your friendships. Love your neighbor as yourself. Next week, Amos the courageous prophet. And that's it.
Thank you.
Okay.